Hello BookTube, this is Weekly Reads. I've had quite the eventful reading week. 2 bales, 5 manga. Let's get started. The first book I read over the course of the weekend for this past reading week is The Swimming Pool Library by Alan Hollinghurst. This is Hollinghurst's first novel, published in 1989 and set in 1983. My birth year. It's the story of Will Beckwith, a 25-year-old gay man who has had his inheritance already signed over to him by his grandfather as a means to avoid death duties. One way of avoiding the inheritance tax in Britain, or at least for a number of decades. I don't know if they've changed it since then, but up to at least through 1983, one way to avoid death duties or inheritance tax was to preemptively sign over your estate to your heirs. And if you manage to live, I think it's like 3 years after the handover, the inheritance is theirs tax-free. Anyway, so Will is incredibly well off, and so he doesn't have to work unless he wants to, and so he spends his days working out, swimming, and cruising. He is quite promiscuous. So one day while he's cruising, he performs CPR on an elderly gay man who himself is cottaging, which is cruising in a public restroom. This action develops into a dialogue between the older gay man and the younger gay man, in which the older gay man, Charles Nantwich, who is himself Lord, asks Will to write his biography. Will initially is skeptical of the offer until his best friend, coincidentally named James, convinces him otherwise, because Charles Nantwich had an encounter with an early 20th century gay author named Ronald Fairbank, of which James and to a lesser extent Will are interested in. So Will begins to read Charles's diaries and become more and more enamored of learning Charles's history, while at the same time dealing with 2 romantic subplots. Initially, Will is dating a young man named Arthur, and then later another young man named Phil. And things progress until there's a revelation which concludes or climaxes the story. So if you've been watching my channel for the past year, you will know I did try to read The Swimming Pool Library last January, and I didn't get past the first chapter. And I tried it again later in the year, and I didn't get past the first chapter. And this year, I finished it. I actually read it. And I am thrilled with that. And I don't understand why, like, I had 2 bales, and I think in 2019, I tried it, and I didn't, kind of put it off then too. So while of this bailing, I mean, yeah, I read it years ago and quite liked it. And so trying to reread it, triple bail, and then reading it this year, and I finished it and rather enjoyed it. I don't know. There's just, for the past 2 years, which I'm hopefully done with, I've had an issue with fiction that I do not understand if it's what it is, but hopefully I'm coming out of it. But we shall see. The year is still young. So I did enjoy rereading The Swimming Pool Library after nearly 15 years and numerous subsequent attempts at rereading it, so very happy. I really love the character of Will. He's the kind of gay protagonist I like, and even though a lot of what I read is science fiction and fantasy, and when they do have gay characters or queer characters, they tend to be a bit more conservatively played or depicted, I think. So I quite enjoyed Will's character, and I enjoyed the plot immensely. There are two scenes in the book, late in the book, that I don't get on with. One that I've never liked, and another one that I don't know if it really is necessary or not. But I especially really enjoyed Will learning about Charles Nantwich and becoming increasingly more interested in his life, and really, I think, wanting to write the biography. All the while having a very active social life. Until, of course, the revelation that sort of throws everything into question. And if anything, and I think my biggest critique of the Swimming Pool Library is that I don't think Hollinghurst necessarily sticks the landing. The conclusion is, it peters out. To a certain extent, Will basically goes back to life as usual, even though, yes, in the next year or so, AIDS happens. But this is still 1983. This is still before the AIDS crisis. So Will basically just goes about his regular day. So that was, I'm not entirely sure what to make of it. Because normally when you do have a novel like this, you kind of want that revelation. You kind of want that something to happen. And it doesn't quite happen, even though, of course, the something not quite happening is perhaps truer to life. Another issue I have with the conclusion is that there's an incident in the book. And this is going to be, excuse me, just had supper. So I guess I ought to just spoil it. This book is 33 years old. 33 years old. So basically, Will's best friend James gets arrested for, I'm thinking, solicitation. I'm not entirely sure. And of course, this arrest draws parallel to, or foreshadows, the big revelation that Charles Nantwich himself was arrested for solicitation in the 50s when homosexual activity was still illegal. So James is arrested for it. It happens that the arresting police officer had previously had sex with Will. And that sort of, well, if he arrested James, why didn't he arrest Will? Is a bit weird. Although I guess maybe there was no touching until they got to Will's house or something. I don't know. I don't really understand that charge. I can't wrap my head around it. Exactly yeah. But I mean, of course, it creates drama. So, but still don't quite understand it. But at the end, Will's trying to find a picture because not only, besides having sex with Will, this police officer also posed for softcore porn photography. And Will's hoping that by pretty much presenting all of this evidence, they could sort of quash the charges or get them dismissed or something. And at the end, the picture is gone. And it's kind of, what exactly happened here? It's weird and never quite set well with me. But anyway, so besides my issues with the conclusion and the two scenes, I did really enjoy this book. It's really good, and I'm looking forward to perhaps finally reading the entirety of Alan Hollinghurst's oeuvre. We shall see. Anyway, so after finishing the Swimming Pool Library, I decided to read some manga. Like I mentioned at the end of Weekly Reads, my plan was if I had January 31st free, I would read some manga to close out the month. So I read the first two volumes of Eden Zero by Hiro Mashima. This is Eden Zero Volume 1. And this is Eden Zero Volume 2, which I bought last month. Eden Zero is Hiro Mashima's current manga series. It's about a young man named Shiki who has lived all of his life, as far as he knows, on an abandoned theme park planet called Granbell, whose only inhabitants are robots. The robots are beginning to break down, which would result in Shiki becoming abandoned, that he would be all alone. Before this happens, Rebecca and her cat Happy come to Granbell to film videos for a B-Cube, basically YouTube. And during Rebecca's stay, she meets Shiki. Events happen, and Shiki and Rebecca leave Granbell as the robots pretty much finally succumb to losing power. Rebecca and Shiki then form a sort of partnership in which Shiki joins an adventurers guild, and they set off to find the cosmic goddess figure, Mother. And they go off on a number of adventures, which include trying to find a better spaceship, adventure to the past, which is amazing, and a fight with some space pirates. And I loved this series. I loved it. When I finished Volume 2, I wanted Volume 3 immediately. This series is so good. I really liked the characterizations, particularly Shiki's. Oftentimes, a shonen hero can be rather off-putting, can be a bit annoying. And particularly when their personality quirks are over-exaggerated. And Shiki's desire for friendship, that he really, really desires and values friendship, can at times get rather annoying. But I think how Mashima handles it is very well done and endearing. And also Rebecca's personality, I quite liked it. Wonderfully well done. And I liked the world building, the sort of gathering of the core cast of characters that happen in these early arcs. So yeah, I'm definitely going to be picking up more AidaIro and reading them over the next few months. Because I mean, there's like about 15 or 16 volumes already out. So, good time to kind of hop on to AidaIro. So now we get to the first Veil, which I started on February 1st, and the last song, and that was Imaro by Charles Saunders. Imaro is a major, well, I would say it's a major sword and sorcery work, and a foundational text in the sword and sorcery subgenre Sword and Soul, which is basically sword and sorcery inspired by Africa, African history, African mythology, and folk tales and stuff. And Imaro is basically a young man who is a member of the Eliassi tribe, famed for their military capabilities. Imaro is an outcast among the Eliassi because while his mother is Eliassi, his father is unknown. And so he faces a lot of discrimination from his people. And he eventually leaves them and goes off on adventures. And while reading this, it's basically a novel and short stories. I realized how much I really didn't like it. I mean, it's important. It's historically important, but unfortunately, I don't think the writing is not really that good, and the sort of the first story, sort of the origin story, I don't think you really need, and I don't think in a way it quite helps, because in the back of your mind you're thinking, well, how exactly, I mean, the Eliassi are supposedly these fine warriors, but ultimately at the end of the day, Imaro probably taught himself how to fight and how to be super badass on his own. That he probably had the bare minimum of actual training or anything. So it's, yeah. But anyway, so I ended up bailing on Imaro. And then on Wednesday, I decided to read some more manga, which I'd originally planned on reading Friday because I was thinking it would take me maybe Tuesday and Wednesday, or Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday to finish Imaro, so I'd be able to read the first 3 volumes of Toilet Bound Hanako-kun by AidaIro. So this is volume 1, and of course if you watched my January book haul, you will have already seen volume 2 and volume 3. So Toilet Bound Hanako-kun is the story of a young woman, Nene, who is a high school equivalent of a high school freshman. When I've described this series in the past, I've mentioned it takes place at an incredibly haunted middle school. There are 7 major hauntings, the 7 mysteries, and a number of lesser hauntings. Actually, the school is, I'm thinking it's probably a private school in Japan, which usually includes a middle school division and a high school division. So Nene is a high school freshman. She hears about the 7th of the 7 mysteries, the Toilet Bound Hanako-san, who, if you go to their bathroom, perform a specific ritual, the ghost will grant you a wish. Nene does so, and expecting a young woman ghost, she's confronted by a young man, Hanako-kun. So Nene requests to make a wish and tells Hanako-kun what it is. So he tries to help her achieve it. This leads to a problem for Nene that Hanako-kun helps her out of, and in exchange she has to become his assistant. And so Nene helps Hanako-kun regulate the other ghosts and hauntings, the supernaturals, who populate the skull. Joining them in their adventures is a young exorcist named Ku, who is I think he would be the equivalent of an 8th grader. I think he's in the last year of the middle school division and about to move over to the high school division. But so he's a young exorcist in training, and he attempts to exorcise Hanako-kun. He's defeated, and sort of there's a friendship formed between the three, and it is an amazing friendship. I love it. And so they go on adventures. They sort of work to regulate the various supernaturals in the school who are starting to act strangely. They're becoming more aggressive, and that leads up to who the main antagonist will be, which is in Volume 4. And much like with Eden Zero, I loved this series so much that when I finished Volume 3, I wanted Volume 4. I mean, I want it now. And it's going to be a bit difficult to find because nobody has new copies. But anyway, so I loved it. I love the artwork is amazing. The characters are amazing, particularly Ku, who there's a arc where him and Hanako-kun are kind of working together, and Hanako-kun is attacked by Ku's older brother, who is himself an exorcist, and kind of the confrontation between Ku and his brother Toru is brilliantly done. It's so well done. I really enjoyed it. And then the concluding chapter in Volume 3, oh, it is amazing. I love it. I love this series. I cannot wait to get more. So that was on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, I'm like, okay, maybe I should try to get a head start on my upcoming weekend reading. So with that in mind, I decided to get a start on Ravenna by Judith Herrin. This is a history of the Italian city of Ravenna, which was for a time a capital of the Roman Empire before it collapsed or was conquered. And I bailed. I don't care for the writing. I thought it was rather dull and lifeless, and I was getting frustrated with it. I wasn't making much progress. I didn't care for this at all, unfortunately. Which is starting to make me wonder if perhaps whatever weird thing I had with fiction the last 2 years might be moving to nonfiction, which is just so annoying. Anyway, so that left Friday free, and I thinking, well, I could read some more manga, but 5 volumes, yeah, that's good. Maybe I should parcel out the mangas and don't kind of gorge myself into a manga slump. So I decided to go ahead and get a jump on what I'll be starting this weekend. So I went ahead and started SOS, Poems 1961 to 2003 by Amiri Baraka. Amiri Baraka was a major American poet from the mid-20th century, whose works are intensely activist, I would say. And I quite like his work for the most part. It's been probably the better part of a year or more since I last read him, and I'm looking forward to rereading him. I've gotten pretty far in. I'm on the second collection, so I think this is a collected works. So I'm into a second collection, and I'm quite enjoying it. It's really fun. I'm having a blast. So, yeah, and I'll talk much more about SOS next week with the next weekly reads. After SOS, I'm thinking I'm either going to read David Mogo God Hunter by Suyi Davies Okungbowa, which is an urban fantasy set in Lagos, Nigeria, that I'm looking forward to. I haven't gotten to it yet, and I really want to. And have a Bell Redemption of The Conductors by Nicole Glover. This is a historical occult detective novel set in, I think, 1870, 1871. It's about two former conductors on the Underground Railroad who have magical powers and who have set up shop as occult detectives in Philadelphia. I tried it last year and didn't have much success, but I'm hoping a rereading will improve things. So we shall see. I'm hopeful. And of course, if I do have some extra time, I'm going to be planning on reading some manga. I'm gravitating towards The Seven Deadly Sins by Nakaba Suzuki. This is volume 1, and this is volume 2. The Seven Deadly Sins is about a young woman named Princess Elizabeth who seeks out the Seven Deadly Sins, order of knights with tremendous power, who disappeared a number of years ago. And she's hoping to find them, reunite them, and lead them to take back her home country, which has been taken over by a order of knighthood who have become tyrants. I read this, I think, in 2020 and quite enjoyed it, and I really want to come back to it and collect more of the series at some point. And I'm thinking of also finally getting around to Dick Fight Island by Reibun. This is a voice love series in which a hidden island country decides political leadership by staging a competition between the various tribes of whose champions can last the longest. And I'll leave it at that. So that's my reading plans for next week. Hopefully I'll have as good a reading week next week as I did this week, even with the 2 bells. Hopefully there are no bells next week. Anyway, so that's all I've got for this week. Next week, obviously, I will be continuing with my library tour. I've begun with the history, and that will continue for at least the next week and probably most of the following week. And then it's on to science fiction and fantasy, which will take forever. Pretty much once I'm finished with history, I'm a little bit past halfway, because my science fiction and fantasy constitute nearly half of my library shelves. So we've still got that to go. I'm also going to be doing a tag on Tuesday Kaminali has created a birthday tag, which sounds fascinating, and I cannot wait to do it. So anyway, BookTube, that's all I've got for you this week. Thank you. Have a great evening and weekend, and stay safe.